Hey everybody, today we're diving into the shocking US war on drug cartels. Well, at this point, it's not so secret anymore with this bombshell release from the DEA on August 18th, 2025, and breaking news of a US MQ-9 drone flying 600 miles into Mexico, hunting cartel kingpins. Everything has changed. America's playing 4D chess now, and it's essentially like they're telling the cartels, hey cartels, come kiss our red, white, and blue ass. The days of talking to the cartels are over, and this breaking news from the administration and the DEA screams that they're saying it's time for action. So we'll uncover how the US and Mexico are teaming up to dismantle these violent organizations. They're no longer narco thugs, these are now designated terrorist organizations. We'll cover what these operations could look like, including that drone mission that took place just a few days ago. We'll talk about who's pulling the triggers and where this war could go next. But that DEA press release names Project Portero. That's Project Goalie. So either they're going to kick some cartel butt like a varsity team versus a JV soccer team, or this is just a desperate ploy for the US to try to win the next World Cup. But part of that DEA memo says this new training program shows how we will fight by planning and operating side by side with our Mexican partners and by bringing the full strength of the US government to bear. So basically they're saying the gloves are off and things just got real. There's some narco terrorists out there shaking in their boots at this point. So according to breaking news from the DEA on August 18th, 2025, Project Portero is the flagship operation to crush cartel gatekeepers, basically the masterminds that are running smuggling corridors along the US-Mexico border. The DEA's press release goes on to say that gatekeepers are essential to cartel operations, directing the flow of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine into the United States while ensuring the movement of firearms and bulk cash back into Mexico. So this memo is saying that by targeting them, the DEA and its partners are striking at the heart of cartel command and control. So it's like the US and the cartels are football teams going head to head, and the US is like, hey, before the game starts, we're gonna burn your playbook. The DEA's launched a multi-week training program at a Southwest Border Intelligence Center that brings Mexican investigators, US law enforcement, prosecutors, defense officials, and intelligence pros together to plan joint raids and, most importantly, share intel. This is an intelligence hub, and this new program is gonna be the go-to spot. It's gonna be the center of the wheel with the different spokes shooting off of it, and those spokes will be directly targeting the cartels, whereas this program will be the intelligence hub for the whole operation. And here's the deal. For decades, the cartel thought they were untouchable, but this new initiative, it likely has them sweating like a cartel boss in a room full of snitches. But in this case, the snitches have the power. You want a little bit of Delta Force? Sure. You want some Navy SEALs? Sure. How about some Predators? How about some Reaper drones? How about some F-35s? Let's just add it all in. Let's make this delicious concoction of American air power, ground power, and sea power, and let's strike the cartels where it hurts the most. That's essentially what's going on right now. But how will Project Portero actually dismantle these violent cartels? Let's break down 4 potential operations starring US air power, drones, and elite teams like Delta Force alongside Mexico's top units, and who is pulling the trigger in these operations. We'll talk about all of that. We'll also discuss ROE, rules of engagement, which is hugely important in any operation, but specifically when you're walking a political tightrope like the US is doing in Mexico with President Sheinbaum. So first, who are Mexico's heavy hitters? The Mexican Navy's Fuerzas Especiales and the Army's Group Aeromóvil de Fuerzas Especiales are the Delta Force type equivalents for Mexico. FES has nabbed big shots like El Chapo with elite training in amphibious and urban ops. Gallos, they shine in rapid response missions in rough terrain. They're tough, but it's said that they are facing corruption risks, potentially infiltrated by the cartels already, and they also have some resource shortages, which will probably be shored up not too long from now by the US bolstering their capability if they're able to root out the corruption first. Those are their most similar comparisons to US Special Operations and Special Forces teams. But what about ROE? For operations against cartels, US Special Forces, UAV pilots, and F-35 pilots likely operate under strict ROE to minimize civilian harm and respect Mexico's sovereignty as best they can. Based on what I could find with DoD practices, ROE would require positive identification, PID of cartel targets, confirmation of hostile intent or terrorist designation, and then of course self-protection or self-defense. That is always a part of any ROE, and that was one of the main ROEs that we operated against when I was flying in combat. But PID, positive identification of cartel targets, is likely the most important. But now with Reaper drones and advanced targeting, with certain systems from Anduril and other advanced companies that focus on AI targeting and other specific chains in the link to actually connect before you can strike, PID is not going to be that hard to get, especially with some of the resolution that you can now get with some of these cameras. And you think about the targeting pod, even the sniper targeting pod on an F-15, or the advanced electro-optical targeting system from an F-35, you can really hone in. I mean, you can probably see a license plate from over 10 miles away. So the fact that you can see that, getting PID is not going to be that hard, but it will be a crucial part of the kill chain for the ROE in Mexico. Scenario 1, we'll call it Nighthawk Takedown. Delta Force and FES raid gatekeeper hideouts in Ciudad Juarez using DEA intel from Project Portero. MQ-9 Reaper drones provide real-time surveillance spotting cartel convoys. FES leads ground ops to respect sovereignty, with Delta Force snipers neutralizing targets if ROE confirms any type of hostile intent. And then Delta operators pull the trigger on site. Whoever gets to the target first pulls the trigger, and that would be guided by PID and commander approval. PID, remember, is that positive identification of a hostile target. And then success here would mean gatekeepers are arrested and smuggling routes are tanked. What's the risk? Cartels could definitely spark urban chaos, and that could spill over into civilian casualties, which would try to be avoided at all costs. And then scenario 2, let's call this one an air power blitz. The US Air Force deploys F-35 jets for precision strikes on cartel drug labs in Sinaloa, with Gallos securing the perimeter and staying far enough away where the F-35s wouldn't need danger close approval. So probably somewhere over 100 yards away, as Gallos stands outside and watches for squirters. That would be any type of drug cartel members leaving the compound trying to escape. And then drone feeds would feed target data to confirm PID and minimize civilian risk. And the F-35 pilots would definitely want approval from a higher command, in this case potentially codenamed Pyramid, the controlling authority that would be working with Mexican officials. So Pyramid would likely need to approve any direct strikes from those F-35s, even if they were time-sensitive strikes, just to avoid any political drama. No one likes that political drama. Can't we all just get along? But those F-35 pilots or those MQ-9 Reapers given the green light to use kinetic strikes would basically be sending a nice little love letter, a nice little note to the cartels saying, hey, your labs are toast and we're not just blowing smoke up your ass. And let's talk about scenario 3 with the actual US Navy assets that are potentially in theater right now. Some confirmed, some unconfirmed, but I like to call this one the Manta Ray meltdown. So the US Navy's Manta Ray UUV, a stealth underwater drone that was tested in 2024, is definitely capable of taking out cartel narco subs off of Mexico's Pacific coast or in the Gulf. With good ROE confirmation, they would ensure no civilian vessels were in the area using sonar and intel. The Manta Ray would deploy precision torpedoes sinking cocaine-laden subs. Mexican FES and Armada de Mexico support would use surface patrols guided by Project Portero's intel. Gallos would secure nearby ports just in case any of those narco subs slipped through the Manta Ray, which is very unlikely. But the Manta Ray's autonomous system executes strikes with human oversights from Naval Command. The Manta Ray's autonomous system would execute strikes with human oversight coming from a nearby Naval Command or a naval vessel. This would disrupt drug shipments, but needs airtight coordination between the Navy and Mexico. And then scenario 4, this has actually taken place, and I believe it will continue to take place because this might be some of the most valuable information that's gathered on the cartels. I call it Operation Deep Mexico Recon. But on August 13th, 2025, during a real mission, a Customs and Border Patrol MQ-9 Guardian drone, call sign Troy 701, launched from San Angelo, Texas at 4 a.m. Eastern Time. This drone flew 800 miles south, 600 miles deep into Mexican airspace. It orbited west of Mexico City in La Nueva Familia, Michoacan, LNFM territory, according to flight track data from Flight Radar 24. This said to be unarmed drone equipped with Raytheon Sea-View radar and electro-optical sensors likely hunted fentanyl labs or high-value targets like LNFM leaders Johnny Hurtado, Olascago. And that dude has a $5 million bounty, and then his partner Jose Hurtado Olascago Mexico has a $3 million bounty. I wonder if they have a you-know-what measuring contest over this. They're sitting there sipping their favorite beverage. Johnny's like, hey, Jose, how's it feel to only have a $3 million bounty? Yeah, I'm sitting at a cool $5 million. A Mexican security official named Omar Garcia Harfuch confirmed that this drone flew at Mexico's request, but this drone actually went dark after about 6 hours, possibly moving to a more sensitive area. What was the ROE for this drone though? Non-lethal ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance only. So no trigger pulling in this case, but it could be setting up for a high value strike. In this case, this drone likely just collected information for the DEA and Mexican forces. Cartel trackers have suggested that LNFM's fentanyl network was targeted and it could be staging a higher level attack or a joint operation to take down their fentanyl labs. This mission could pinpoint cartel assets for Project Portero raids, but it definitely risks tensions if Mexico feels spied on. It also risks tipping off top informants and cartel members if the location of where this drone is spying becomes public. So that is likely why this drone went dark with its transponder being turned off. But Mexico's in the hot seat now. So President Claudia Sheinbaum has said hugs, not bullets, for the cartels. What could go wrong with that situation? I'm sure the cartels love hugs, but in this case, they hug you with 15 rolls of duct tape and they drop you in a nearby lake. But this hugs not bullet approach, they focus on social programs, and this hasn't worked. It hasn't stopped cartels like CJNG, Sinaloa, and LNFM with over 30,000 homicides in 2024 that is linked to the cartels' turf wars alone. And the recent White House press release has confirmed this. They've said that partner nations must do more, and they're not wrong. Cartels are running wild. Imagine Sheinbaum out there with a sign at a cartel compound that says free hugs, and then there's a drone flying over with a Hellfire missile. I wonder which one will work better at this point. Sheinbaum, good luck. But Project Portero is a step forward, and Mexican investigators are training with the DEA to target gatekeepers, and the MQ-9 missions show some cooperation. But Sheinbaum has called that the US military will not have an invasion with a conventional force, but that leaves the door open for unconventional operators like Delta Force, SEAL teams, other special forces, and special operators teamed up with American air power to actually go in. But as you can see, the tensions are still high. And Mexico has to root out any type of corruption, and that is probably at the forefront of the mission for the Mexican forces, for the FES and the GAOS. The US has to make sure that these forces can actually disrupt the cartels and not tip them off before a high-value target operation begins, and then risks the lives of operators that are on the ground and potentially pilots in the air. These cartels have had free reign in Mexico and billions of dollars to build surface-to-air infrastructure to potentially target helicopters and fixed-wing assets. But the US is cranking up the heat, so I picture it kind of like Mexico's a linebacker in a football game, and the US is like, all right, game on, but you don't have any pads, Mexico. Let's see if you can actually play in the game and create some real results against the cartels, and then we'll give you some pads in this full contact competition. Next, I want you to meet Ronald Johnson. He's Mexico's ambassador to the US since 2023. This guy's essentially the new quarterback in the US-Mexico relations game. Born in New Mexico, he's a career diplomat with counterterrorism chops, serving as US ambassador to El Salvador from 2019 to 2021, where he was said to have crushed gang networks and tackled migration issues. So he's perfect prep for this cartel showdown. And what's Johnson's playbook? Push Mexico to embrace Project Portero's joint task forces and missions like the MQ-9 recon. So Johnson's basically giving Mexico options if they cooperate in Portero to keep the US military action in a conventional way at bay. But he's likely lobbying for US funds to boost FES and GAIOS training and different technologies to root out corruption. He's using his counterterrorism know-how to drive deep intel sharing on gatekeepers. But with Sheinbaum, Mexico's president's sovereignty stance, he's dodging diplomatic tackles to keep his partnership alive. So if he can pull this off, now he's the MVP. He's essentially the GOAT, the greatest of all time. But if not, then it's game over for this smooth teamwork operation. And with Johnson's CIA background, I know he's got some playbook up his sleeve that he's not quite sharing with Mexico if they're unable to coordinate in the way that Johnson wants them to. So he's given them an opportunity, and now it's on Sheinbaum and Mexico to actually come through. And their feet are finally being held to the fire by Johnson, which is awesome, and I wonder if his CIA background is helping out with that at all. Yeah, I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Now let's talk a bit about the US naval presence in the Gulf of America, or the Gulf of Mexico, or can we just all agree to call it the Gulf of, hey cartels, you're not gonna work here anymore. The Navy's flexing some serious muscle with Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, littoral combat ships, and the Manta Ray UUV, packing MQ-8 Fire Scout drones and P-8 Poseidon aircraft. These use sonar, radar, and AI-driven analytics to track narco subs. The Manta Ray, tested off California in 2024, can glide for months, hibernate on the seafloor, and deliver payloads like torpedoes to sink cartel subs with precision. The Navy's teaming with the Coast Guard and Mexico's Armada de Mexico, which rolls out fast boats and C-295M aircraft. Project Portero's intel guides joint patrols, with the Manta Ray and US drones spotting targets and Mexican ships making arrests to respect sovereignty. This could choke cartel sea routes, but diplomatic waves could rock the boat. It's like the US Navy is telling the cartels, hey, your smuggling game's about to sink faster than a rookie's dreams when they get sent down to the AAA from the major leagues. But cartels are a global game, and Colombia and Venezuela are key players. Colombia is the world's cocaine factory, basically feeding cartels like Sinaloa. The US and Colombia's Plan Colombia has poured billions into anti-drug ops, and President Gustavo Petro is on board, but rural cartels are tough to crack. But shifting to Venezuela, Venezuela is essentially a mess. The Maduro regime is tied to the cartel of the Suns that's run by military insiders in the actual Maduro regime. They've been smuggling cocaine like it's going out of style, and the 2024 US State Department report calls Venezuela a major transit hub. And since Maduro is so deep into the cartel of the Suns, it's essentially like they are a cartel organization themselves. So Maduro's cooperation is a pipe dream. So where's this war actually going? Ryan, what is actually happening here? Can we please talk about it? Thank you so much for asking. Project Portero's training and missions like the MQ-9 recon will definitely pay off. Gatekeepers will most likely get nabbed, and a lot of the cartels have a potential for their networks to crumble. Mexico's FES and Gallos, backed by the US tech like the Manta Ray, could shut down smuggling routes. But what's the worst case? If Mexico drags its feet, or if corruption rears its head in Mexico's top elite forces, then the US might need to send in more drones or additional troops, potentially unconventional troops to start. So if Mexico drags its feet, then the US might send in drones, and potentially armed drones this time, with other fixed-wing assets, potentially Apache attack helicopters or other drones that can strike high-value targets inside of Mexico. But Venezuela's narco ties could pull in support from Russia or China, which would just be a mess, and that would turn this into a global brawl, or at least a global Cold War, where Russia and China are supporting these narco terrorists while the US just keeps playing whack-a-mole. What do you guys think? What do you think happens with this conflict and this new Operation Portero? Where do you think it goes, and do you think the US and Mexico can effectively take out and dismantle these narco terrorists? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I've got a lot more videos headed your way on this subject and others. If you have ideas for other topics you'd like me to cover, throw those in the comments below as well. And the best compliment you can give the channel is just watch this video right here. That would help out the channel a ton. I'll see you on this video right here. This is Ryan, Max Afterburner, also known as the fighter pilot next door, signing off.